Hey gang, what's up? So for as long as I can remember, I've always been a big fan of Doctor Who. The first episode I ever saw was The Lazarus Experiment back in 2007 Series 3, where the Doctor and pals run around a cathedral trying to evade a frankly monstrous being that still gives me nightmares. Especially when I was a 1.5-year-old back then, but I was still intrigued. I jumped on partway through Series 7, leading to the 50th anniversary special, and then my Doctors became Capaldi and Whittaker as I've been watching theirs as they've been releasing. With the 60th anniversary specials dropping imminently, with the Star Beast airing on Saturday the 25th of November, and Russell T Davies's return right around the corner, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to rank the 13 seasons of New Doctor Who, ranging from 2005's Rose to 2022's The Power of the Doctor. It's also a fitting time as it's been announced that they will not continue to season 14 and will instead reset the system to series 1, which is an interesting choice, but with conjunction to Disney Plus, this makes sense. As always, this is my personal opinion and I'd love to hear your opinions on the show in the comments. I think all 13 series of this show are great and I respect the production team, actors and everyone who puts hard work into them. Being a film nerd who kind of wants to work for the BBC, I respect the show and its creators. I'll probably generalise the showrunners rather than individual episode writers, so don't at me in the comments. I've ranked these in terms of the portrayal of the Doctor, their companions, the stories in the series, and the overall story arc. To me, the story arc that runs through the series is quite important. Under each series, I'm counting every episode that's listed on iPlayer as part of it. This includes specials, so some seasons have a lot more than others to offer. So, without further ado, let's get on with my ranking for the 13 series of Doctor Who. Number 13, Series 11. Unfortunately, there has to be a last place, and for me, that's Jodie Whittaker's freshman year with new showrunner Chris Chibnall. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy this series, but for me, as a Capaldi fan, I did feel it took a huge change in pace and development. Problems with this series have been discussed a lot recently on the internet due to it being the recent run of the show, so a lot of my opinions will probably be the same as those said before, so I'll try and keep it brief. To me, there's nothing wrong with having 3 companions in the TARDIS. The issue here is that none of them feel defined enough, and this really hurts the stories. There was an arc between Ryan and Graham, but for me this wasn't fleshed out enough. They needed more time rather than just being left on the backbench. And also, Yaz wasn't necessary. Her characterization is the same as the other two and just gawking at the Doctor the entire time. I think the 13th Doctor's era could have benefited from Yaz maybe being an Earthbound companion in the first season, followed by a full-fledged companion in the following 2. That way you give Ryan and Graham more time to shine in their first, before handing the spotlight to Yaz and her character development. Bradley Walsh's charisma is great and it really carries the character of Graham rather than it being something written on the page. Inconsistent. It's a good word for this series. The characterization of the 13th Doctor doesn't feel complete. Each episode she's taking on different character traits that seem like the episodes weren't thought out long term. The quality of the episodes though, to me, that remained quite neutral. The issue I have with this season is how middling it remained throughout the whole thing. There were no particular high or low points, it was just fine. By the end of the series, I still don't feel like I know the 13th Doctor. Jodie Whittaker's performance is good, but she's not given enough to work with. Instead, a lot of the time the stories halt halfway through for her to explain what's going on and wave a Sonic everywhere. It's not particularly interesting. Now, I understand the ethos of bringing in no returning villains and relying on original ideas here, but the issue is none of these are mainstays going forward. Does anyone really remember the Thajarians from Demons of the Punjab? Following that, the series arc is practically non-existent. They just rely on the same monsters showing up from the first episode to the last, with an equally forgettable name. However, I do think the appearance of the Dalek in the New Year's special Resolution was a welcome addition to the series. Number 12, Series 13. Now I will give this series a lot of slack, as it was created and released during the pandemic. It was cut down from a 10 episode plus special series, like Jodie's previous ones, to a 6 episode arc called Flux, with a few specials coming the next year. I was intrigued by the Flux, a storm hurtling across the universe, displacing planets and armies in time and space. However, they tried to pack too much into these 6 episodes that there's no time to breathe. The standout episodes were War of the Sontarans and Village of the Angels, as Chris Chibnall is able to handle returning monsters quite well. I think had this been a full series outside the pandemic, these 2 episodes would have been able to flourish without having hindrances of ongoing plot arcs. Dan as the new companion was fine, but he wasn't really given that much to do. He barely even hung out with the Doctor and just was off doing his own thing during the whole Flux story. And then got to the Centenary special and just left, and Yaz's goodbye after 3 series was a bit forgettable. I felt like there needed to be more oomph to this, seeing as Yaz is one of the longest serving companions in New Who. It was nice to have many returning faces in the Centenary special, but this took away from it being Jodie's last episode. There wasn't enough focus on her, and the direction of that last episode was a bit void. You had the Master, the Cyber Masters, and Daleks all running around doing who knows what. This series just falls into the category of being a bit of a COVID mess, along with having to tie up plot arcs from the previous series, which we'll get to. And at number 11, Series 12. This series suffers from many of the same issues as its predecessor. We have the same set of companions, and they're developed slightly, but this all happens off to the side and not in the main story. However, this series took a total 180 from the last, in having several returning monsters, and a plot arc so huge it was going to break the canon wide open. Now, conceptually, I quite like the idea of the Timeless Child, a being that the Time Lords found generations ago and experimented on until they could understand its power. It really fits in with their mythology. However, the main issue I have with it is that the Timeless Child turns out to be the Doctor. One of the things that makes the Doctor great is that they didn't come from greatness, they just went around the universe solving problems and became a hero to all. This is kind of stricken away, but at the same time, this whole revelation doesn't really mean anything. The Doctor just takes it in stride and moves on. Much like how I thought Yaz was unnecessary in Series 11, Graham and Ryan suffer from this in Series 12. Having completed their arc in the 11th series, they're kind of just hanging around for these 10 episodes, and then leave. We've spent 2 seasons with them at this point, and each one still hasn't got the development they deserve. I thought many of the returning monsters were handled well, including the Jadoon, Cybermen, and the Master, along with a few nice additions to the collection with the Skithra, Kasavin, and Dregs. Although the Dregs weren't in the greatest episode of all time. Seeing Captain Jack come back was a nice addition, but he didn't really do anything. Once again, he was just put at the side like any other character and talks for a bit, but nothing particularly interesting. Also great to see Sacha Dhawan as the Master. To me, the Master's arc is concluded really well at the end of Series 10. His interpretation of the character was great, but I didn't like the idea that he killed Gallifrey. I want to see some Gallifrey Time Lord stuff in the new series. Please, Russell. Overall, this series has a lot more ups and downs as opposed to just middling mids. Number 10, Series 7. Matt Smith's final series as the 11th Doctor is next for me. Showrunner Stephen Moffat has said that his focus for this year was on the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor, which was a highlight of the show, but it meant that the overall series this year suffered. I think that Amy and Rory as the companions, although I love them, should have left at the end of Series 6 properly. I think this series should have been given to Clara, Victorian Clara I mean, and she should have been given more time to flesh out with the 11th Doctor before moving in with 12. I was a fan of how Amy and Rory left out with The Angels Take Manhattan, but I think that this drawn out ending for them was unnecessary. Generally, the longer a companion stays in the TARDIS, the more I grow weary of them, so 2 seasons is about enough for me. Some of my favourites are the ones that are only around for 1 series. Over Matt Smith's era, there are many plot threads that weren't particularly well tied up here. Stephen Moffat is incredibly good at setting up things, but due to the 50th anniversary intervening, there was a lot to tie up in little time. The ideas of the cracks in the walls and the silence are sort of chucked to the wayside a little bit and summed up in a conversation in the Christmas special. I was really hoping there would be a little bit more to it than that. I like the idea of the blockbuster every week style, giving you something very different each time, but overall the stories aren't developed enough and given enough time to breathe. There are no 2-parters, and I think there definitely could have been, especially with the burnout before the 50th. It would have been nice to take a little bit of a break and flesh out some of these stories a bit more. In the second half of the series, following the Christmas special The Snowmen, which I think is a standout episode, the arc with the Great Intelligence isn't the best fleshed out. He kind of just appears every now and again and doesn't really have any significant weight over the plot. I think this could have been a villain for a spin-off with the Paternoster gang, which I think they definitely deserved. However, it was great to see the 8th Doctor Paul McGann return, even if it was only for a minisode before the 50th anniversary. It was a nice little addition to the collection for this year. The whole Impossible Girl character arc for Clara, I'm not interested in it. It puts her up on a pedestal rather than fleshing her out more, and just makes her a bit of a plot device instead. You're not so much interested in her as a character as you are where this plotline is going. Standout episodes this series include The Rings of Akaten and The Day of the Doctor. It was great to see John Hurt as the War Doctor, even if only for the one episode. Series 7 is also where we see the introduction of Kate Lethbridge-Stewart. I really enjoy this character, and I kind of wish she stuck around more over the years. She only really gets an episode or a two-parter every time she appears in a series. At number 9, Series 9. We've now hit the time where I was watching the show as it was releasing, so I have more connection and nostalgia towards it. However, I do think Series 9, the 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi's second, was his weakest. To me, again, this suffers from the continued companion situation. I tend to enjoy companion the less time they stick around, as it keeps everything fresh, and this is now Clara's third series, and although I quite like her, I think she's had her time. She's already had time with both Doctors. I like many of the episode concepts for this season. Stephen Moffat really hits a nail on the head later on with refining the ideas. Obviously a standout is Heaven Sent, but among this you have the Flood two-parter and Zygons. This was the year of two-parters, and they are a welcome change. Maisie Williams' Ashildr, the Immortal Girl, was a welcome addition to the crew. She pops in every now and again, and I actually would have quite liked to see more of her. Maybe as a replacement to a companion, just popping in and out while Capaldi goes on his own adventures. However, where this series suffers the most for me is the story arc. The hybrid. The elusive hybrid. The hybrid is supposedly a mixture of two warrior races, and this never really comes into play at all. Each episode there may be a reference to a character thinking it's the mix between these, and by the end there isn't really an answer. It's all just a folktale that the Time Lords tell each other. After the Day of the Doctor reintroduced the planet, Gallifrey is explored a little bit more here. But we only get one episode with it, and it isn't even focused on the Time Lords really. It's instead focused on the Doctor wanting to get Clara back. And we all know how I feel about that. This is coming off the back of Heaven Sent, an episode which deals greatly with his grief, and then we go into the next episode and that comes crashing down. I kind of wish this series as a whole would delve more into Gallifrey. It seemed like it was a logical way to go after the ending of Day of the Doctor, but alas, here we are. Finally, this series' Christmas special is the last appearance of River Song, and I think it's a very beautiful episode that ties up her character perfectly. As much as I love her, I don't want them to bring her back in the main show. It wouldn't fit. Good work as a spin-off though. There's another one for you, Russell. Number 8, Series 2. Series 2 had the harder job of confirming that this show did indeed need more seasons and could keep itself afloat with viewership. I think that David Tennant's first season does this perfectly. My main issue with this series was the dynamic between Rose and the Doctor. I felt that Rose was in her prime with Series 1 and the 9th Doctor, and although this relationship did work between them, I wasn't particularly interested. Then again, I wasn't watching the show as it came out. This was me going back and watching previous episodes, so maybe I just don't have a connection to those two as a pair. However, where Rose is done the best is, funnily enough, her exit. Doomsday is a magnificent episode with a war between Daleks and Cybermen, which is still very cool. Rose's ending up on the parallel world, is tragic, and it's a great send-off for her. It allows her to come back later on. The ongoing arc with the mention of Torchwood ever since Tooth and Claw is quite interesting, and you don't really notice it at first. However, Torchwood itself in the finale doesn't really do much. It does work as good setup for the show that comes later on, but they're a very different calibre of the team. Both new and returning monsters are dealt with fantastically, some a lot more interesting than others. I'm looking at you, Absorbaloff. Though I do know you were made by a child. Overall, I don't have too many opinions on this series because I just don't have an attachment to it. It's perfectly fine, and it's got the highs and lows that all Doctor Who series need. Number 7, Series 6. Although quite messy, I do like this series. River Song was one of my favourite characters, and seeing her arc take the forefront was very exciting. With the story arc focused on her and the Silence, there was a lot going for it. The family dynamic inside the TARDIS is great, and the development of the main story during the first half of the series with Amy being stolen and the Flesh Gangers is great and builds to an overall conclusion in The Good Man Goes to War. However, this comes a bit too soon for me. A Good Man Goes to War is great, but you don't know any of the additional characters that are going to support the Doctor. It feels like it's going for the vibe of Journey's End from Series 4, but without the previous 3 seasons for setup. You get people like the Paternoster Gang and others who are all just showing up. And these are great characters that are introduced more in the future, but we don't know any of them. This could have worked well, but it falls a little bit flat. For me, where this series suffers the most is in the second half with the development of the River Song arc. Her having regenerations could have been cool, but it's not really used. You should either go one way or the other in having her regenerate multiple times, or just leaving it out completely. Her regenerations are only really mentioned twice, once at the end of Day of the Moon and the other in Let's Kill Hitler, where she gets rid of them. So, what gives? Can you imagine a series where they're being chased down by a regenerating criminal who gets to their last mon in the cycle and turns into River? Alternatively, just scrap the regenerations and make her fully human. The Kavarian chapter as the villains feel very one-note, and Madame Kavarian is quite a one-dimensional character. It feels really cartoonish in the way they'd want the Doctor dead, and this could have also benefited from more development in Series 7, which we didn't really get. Once again, there was a lot of setup and not enough payoff for me. However, there were a lot of really fun episodes along the way that make this series wonderful. One-off episodes like The Doctor's Wife and The God Complex really flesh out the Doctor and their relationship with other characters. These episodes make the 11th Doctor seem like a more cynical character who's hiding all of this under his whimsy to try and look flamboyant and fun for the Ponds. The opening two-parter with The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon is a very exciting start to the series. The Silents are a very interesting foe with a fun ability, and they needed a stronger figurehead to lead them through the series. Overall, this has strong one-off stories, but lacks slightly overall with its story arc. Number 6, Series 8. Sticking with the Stephen Moffat era of showrunning, Peter Capaldi's first series as the Doctor is next. This series holds up well overall with its new Doctor. There's a tonal shift that I quite like for the series. It goes in a darker, more classic direction. I don't particularly like that the Doctor kept the 11th Doctor's sonic screwdriver and the TARDIS design was just a redone version of the one from last series. This is the best TARDIS design by far for me, as it's the one I've sort of grown up with, but I didn't really like that it was previously introduced with Smith. His was great, and he should have seen that one right through to its end. This series has some great ideas going for it in the concepts for each episode, and the character arc overall seems a lot more grounded as the Doctor asks himself if he's a good man. It's a nice change of pace from world-ending disasters every single season. Many people weren't keen and open to the idea of an older Doctor, but I think this is a nice direction for the show. It fundamentally changes his dynamic between the companions. Clara seems like a completely different character from Series 7 to this. She's now a school teacher and basically the Doctor's carer as opposed to a infatuated love interest. I wasn't particularly a fan of that in Series 7, so this is a nice change. It might as well have been a whole new character, and in fact she kind of is, and this is a Clara that I much prefer to the one from Series 7. I like the focus on her life at school and getting a balance between her travels in the TARDIS and back and home life, trying to build a career for herself. Giving her a love interest with Danny Pink is a great way of grounding her, although I don't think Danny is given the most interesting stuff to work with. They just seem fighting a lot of the time, and I don't really get a grip that these two are actually wanting to be together. The fact that they went so far as to kill him off and actually stay dead was quite interesting, and it was great motivation for Clara going forward. I'm actually not a hater of Kill the Moon, unlike many people. I quite like it conceptually, although it was a little bit messy in execution. It was a great challenge for Clara and really made this character come into her own and say no to the Doctor, which a season ago she would never have really done. And then there's Missy, a delightful character who appears quite a lot throughout the series when characters die off, only to appear at the end with her Cybermen that have come back from the dead. This is the first of 3 finales where the Master is controlling the Cybermen to do his bidding, and this devalues them a little bit. Missy is a great reincarnation of the Master, and her plan to give the Doctor an army of the undead is great. It really feeds into the am I a good man plot that the story's been going for so far, and keeps the story very much grounded, although there seems to be this world-ending threat. Also, the Doctor becoming president of the world is quite fun, even if he doesn't really do much as it. For me, the standout episodes this series were The Mummy on the Orient Express and Flatline. It's nice to see the return of the Clockwork Men in the opener Deep Breath, but I think this episode is way too drawn out. For Capaldi, this series arc was just to see who this new Doctor was, and I think that was a much needed change. Next, at number 5, we have Series 3. This was a great test for the show as it was the first series without Rose Tyler as the main companion. The series introduces Martha Jones as the new companion, and she is a welcome addition to the crew. Martha is one of my favourite companions from the show, as her role as a doctor plays into a lot of the episodes, and her characterisation is just really fun and entertaining. Being not the biggest fan of Rose, this was a nice addition. However, Martha does suffer with her infatuation of the Doctor. After having a season of Rose and the Doctor oogle each other the whole time, I was hoping for a little bit more of a change from that. The Doctor doesn't seem interested and Martha is, and it makes for a fun dynamic for a bit, but she can do better. And eventually she does. She comes back in a future series and has grown as a character, and it's great to see her return. The fundamentals are all here though. Series 3 brings about some excellent adventures for the Doctor and Martha, namely Smith and Jones, the Family of Blood two-parter, and Blink, which neither of them are really in. Blink proves that Doctor-like episodes can work after the interesting episode that was Love and Monsters in Series 2. This series also features the Lazarus Experiment, which was my first episode, and the CGI may not hold up in that anymore, but it establishes some great things for the story going forward, especially with Martha's family. Martha's family are very important in the ongoing series, and it's really nice to see their relationship towards the Doctor. The setup of Harold Saxon was brilliant. It's been in the works since Series 1's Christmas special, The Christmas Invasion. This plays into the same way that Torchwood was introduced in Series 2, and it's a nice way of continuing that streamlined arc while having off adventures. Also, did anyone else notice, but I think either the Toclafane or the Master note that the darkness is coming? Is the Master's big plan here to avoid the Daleks? Great setup for the next series. The solution in the finale to this series wasn't the best, but it's more about the concept with Martha than it was with the sci-fi element. 3-part finale is a fun change from the formula so far, and you really get a sense of dread as it builds towards the last of the Time Lords. The end of Utopia and the sound of the drums, you really feel like the team, now including Jack returning from Series 1, are in a desolate situation. Now with this being Martha's series, it also has Martha's exit as a companion after a pretty horrific way for her family to be living for the last year. Her being the bigger man and saying her feelings for the Doctor and leaving is a great and fitting ending for her. This is one of the standout companion exits. Number 4, Series 1. Continuing with Russell T Davies' first run with the show, this first series was the launching point for this new generation of Doctor Who fans, and it worked, allowing all of these future series to happen. I actually think having this be the only series with the 9th Doctor really helps it. In one series, we're able to meet a new Doctor, their companion, go on adventures through time and space, and see a regeneration. This really establishes all of the key points of Doctor Who, and for anyone watching the show, they need to watch this first series. Hopefully with the arrival of the 15th Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, in their new Series 1, we'll get a lot of these repeating threads of starting the show from scratch again. This series definitely stuck the landing and introduced some fun new concepts with returning monsters from the classic era and also some new familiar faces like the Slitheen. The series arc overall is woven in quite nicely. This introduces us to the first time we have a name that will be repeated throughout the series, but there's a little bit more to it than that in this first series. Although we get the repeated motif of Bad Wolf appearing everywhere, we get these episodes that play into the larger story, like Dalek, The Long Game, and the arrival of Captain Jack and the Empty Child when the Doctor dances. The Gas Mask Child is a truly creepy threat. This TARDIS team is one of the all-time greats. You have the Doctor, Rose Tyler, and Captain Jack every now and again. Captain Jack is a nice addition as he's out of this time and just sort of doing his own thing. I like those companions that are not of this world or an alien species or in a different point in time. Also, Rose going on The Weakest Link was one of the best things I've seen in Doctor Who. With this era of Doctor Who, they also brought in the companion's family a bit more. You see Jackie Tyler, Rose's mum, and her boyfriend Mickey, as they interact with the Doctor's world and are quite hesitant, which is fair enough. How could we mention this series without mentioning Harriet Jones? The series also saw the introduction of David Tennant in the Christmas special and really established the Christmas special as a major part of Who. It was a bit of a shame that we missed out on this during the Chibnall era, but I'm very excited to see what they do with Ncuti Gatwa in this year's Christmas episode. The Doctor is quite interesting, having just walked away from the Time War and being the last of his kind, and it's nice to see him already fleshed out rather than us being introduced to a newly regenerated Doctor. He's already kind of figured himself out, but Rose's intervention really helps his character grow. Foundation here is excellent, and I can't wait to see what they do with the new series of Who. And number 3, Series 10. This series will always be quite close to my heart. Really, Bill was the first companion I saw all the way through, because Clara had already spent time with the 11th Doctor before Capaldi started. Bill and Capaldi's dynamic is amazing. It's a change from everything we've seen before. We've gone from lovers now to a professor-student dynamic. Nardole is also a great companion on the side, acting as a comic relief, and he's a sort of android thing, so isn't human, which is great for the sort of companions I like. Bill asks all the questions you wouldn't expect and comes at the whole thing from a completely different angle. Missy in the Vault was great, and her eventual arc to basically becoming a companion was good to see. She becomes a sort of so-so Doctor, and although it goes majorly wrong, she is trying to get better and even confronts her former self. The mystery from what's in the vault is also seen from Bill's perspective, so any new viewer jumping in can sort of unravel this as it's going along and not need to know who Missy is. But those who are long-time viewers will be rewarded. This series was pitched by Stephen Moffat as a so-so reboot or a nice entry point for new viewers. And yes, it does have a lot of consistent themes from previous and only really lasts a season before Jodie comes along. It's a really nice place to start and have a self-contained series. The final two-parter is jaw-dropping and frankly tragic. Seeing all of the characters from across this season go out in such awful ways, Bill being turned into a Cyberman, Nardole being stranded on this ship trying to get out of a black hole, and the Doctor dying and being forced to regenerate. It's a great ending. However, this is slightly tampered by the fact that Capaldi still has a Christmas special following this that Bill and Nardole appear in, even if they're like memory people. It's a fun episode, but The Doctor Falls is an excellent way of ending Capaldi's run. The Monk 3-parter halfway through the season is fine. You can tell that all 3 episodes were written by different people as they don't flow too well, but it's a nice development of Bill, and the Doctor being blind is quite a cool twist. Bill's episodes overall are really fun. To me, there aren't any particular standouts because they're all just good quality. Bill and the Doctor have their adventures in past, present and future as usual with any other companion and Doctor dynamic, and they're just really interesting. They get saved by Missy later on, and it's a good point in her arc to develop. It's welcoming to new viewers but continues the flow of the show we've already got. Capaldi seems the most defined he ever has here, fitting into this role of the professor at the university, and finally getting rid of Clara really helped with that. Overall, because I love Capaldi's Doctor so much, I'm quite sad that they cut the episode count down from 13 in a special to 12. That extra episode of season could have been really fun either for a 2-parter or an extra adventure. I get it's probably to do with budget, but hey ho, one can wonder. Number 2. Series 5. With only 2 series left, one had to sit comfortably in second spot, and it had to be this. The other series I just am in love with, so being second to that is no mean feat. Following the end of Russell T Davies's era and its magnificent finale, Stephen Moffat had large boots to fill, but he handled it spectacularly with the introduction of the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith. Matt Smith's performance as the Doctor is electric. He has a great connection with Amy Pond as the lead companion, and the season arc this time round is flawless. Unlike previous, where it would just be a word appearing every now and again until the finale, the plot arc really plays in here, binding all the episodes together with the cracks in space and time. There will be whole episodes where the cracks are what the episode is centered around, even if you don't realize it at first. This can be seen in both the Angel and Silurian 2-parters. To me, the 11th Hour remains to be the best Doctor Regeneration episode. It really establishes the new tone and direction for the show, along with the portrayal of the Doctor, his companion, the themes that are going to continue forth for another 2 seasons, and what this relationship between the Doctor and companion is going to be like since she met him as a child. The Doctor meeting Amy when she was a little girl is a genius move. She fantasizes about him in her imagination, and then he returns 12 years later. It makes some great time travel stories and really fulfills the concept of the show. This season also brings back River Song from the previous, in a slightly more fleshed out role, but her secrets have still not been revealed yet. The finale is also excellent with the Pandorica opens and Big Bang. Having Amy and Rory's wedding be the next point in their timeline that they're running away from was a great move. It gives the show a great momentum and really establishes the family dynamic inside the TARDIS. Previously we'd just seen characters like Jackie and Martha's mum at home minding their own business and investigating the Doctor. But now we have Amy and Rory together in the TARDIS, going off on adventures and discussing these sort of ideas as they're going along. Episodes worth noting are the Angel two-parter, the finale, Vincent and the Doctor, and Amy's Choice. This series has an excellent crescendo towards the end, and really sets up where Matt Smith's era could be going. Number 1, Series 4. Was there any other way about it for me? The fact that David Tennant and Catherine Tate are coming back for one more shot makes me very excited, but nervous. Their arc in Series 4 is wrapped up so well, and I really hope that what happens in these specials doesn't go against that and only adds to it. Anyway, this series wasn't just the end of David Tennant's 10th Doctor, but also the end of the Russell T Davies era as a whole. Bringing back Donna the Runaway Bride from Series 2's Christmas special was a great move. Catherine Tate eats up every scene that she's in. The dynamic between Ten and Donna is a much needed shift from the flirting that had been happening for the last 3 seasons. Donna knows that she doesn't want him in that sense and simply just wants to go with him in adventure around the universe. Thinking of the previous companions, they're all able to come back this time round to really wrap up this whole adventure they've all been on. Earlier on in this series, we get the return of Martha for 3 episodes. She's really developed off screen between these times in a really natural way. The series has a good balance of incorporating these characters from previous times and Donna's own adventures. In this season we see the first appearance of River Song, who at this point knows everything about the Doctor but we've never met her before. It's really intriguing and sets up where the show's going to go in the future. We also meet Jenny, who's only a one-time character but is really influential in the Doctor's life. We also get our 3rd Doctor Light episode, this time with Donna, our companion. We reconnect with Rose, who's trying to jump across her parallel universes to reach the Doctor and warn him of the coming darkness. Seeing every major player from the last 4 seasons appear in one episode together was awesome, and they need a good villain to come up against, and the Daleks do fulfill that. The epic finale of The Stolen Earth and Journey's End really work well to incorporate the spin-off shows that had come out of the previous seasons, such as Torchwood with Captain Jack, and the Sarah Jane Adventures, which came out of Series 2's School Reunion. Everyone we've known from the last series stood around the TARDIS flying it together is a satisfactory payoff. And this leads into Donna's exit of the show. The most tragic the show has ever had, which is why I'm worried about her coming back. The Doctor having to wipe her memories and send her home without her having a choice is heartbreaking. However, with the end of Journey's End, we weren't quite done with 10 yet, since the production team was about to go through a major shake-up. With a new Doctor and showrunner coming in, there was a year gap, so there were a few specials placed throughout. These specials each have one-off companions that are fun, with the highlight episode in the bunch being The Waters of Mars. The final 2-part End of Time finale is fine. It's not the greatest way the series could have ended out with Russell T Davies' era, but we do get some amazing character moments, especially with Wilf. Bernard Cribben's Wilf is a lovable old man who is a perfect fit for Tennant's last spin as the Doctor. There are no episodes in this series that I can really fault, and I can just go and switch one on whenever I feel like it. Overall, this series remains the best in New Who, and will do, seeing as we're only going to get these 13 series before the soft reboot. We'll see how it all works with the new Series 1, but I'm very excited to see where the show's going in the future. And there we have it. A slightly longer video than intended at first, but I hope you got something out of it. Let me also know in the comments your ranking of all of these series if you're a diehard fan, or your thoughts of the show for any new viewers. I'd strongly recommend it, all on iPlayer. I love this show and really hope the new episodes and series of it are brilliant. It deserves all the care in the world, and part of me really wants to work on it one day. We'll see. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't already. It really means a lot. The views on this have been climbing a lot quicker than I expected so far. I'm still quite new to YouTube, so I'm really trying things out, so it would be great to get some feedback in the comments to help me along on what direction I should be looking into. Check out the other fun videos we've got going on this channel, and look out for more reviews and rankings to come in future. In the meantime, know you're awesome and have a great week. Goodbye for now.